Well, hello friends. Welcome to the SerenityOS update for April 2023. As you may have noticed, I'm currently taking a little break from my regular YouTube content, and I'm trying to get better at writing. So if you would like to read what I write about SerenityOS and other topics as well, you can follow along on my Substack. There's a link in the video description below. But of course, we're still going to do monthly update videos, even though I'm not making hacking videos. And this is the monthly update. So it has been another nice month in the project with just under 1,200 commits. And I think that was where we were last month as well. So the pace is pretty consistent in the project, which is nice. And we have a nice selection of things to look at today. So let's just get started. So welcome to the April edition of the SerenityOS desktop. The first thing I want to talk about today is performance. So we've seen some interesting performance work across the system, and one such place is Assistant, where Tim Ledbetter has made it even faster to search for stuff here. So it really is just updating as you type nowadays. And Tim did two optimizations that made it even faster. So one of the things he did was that we used to reload the list of installed applications every time that you type. So for example, I'm looking for the text editor. Every time I'm typing one more letter, it goes and looks through the list of installed apps. Now we cache that list, which means that we don't have to enumerate the apps. The other thing is that if we have a bunch of file results in the file system based on your search, we don't instantiate results for things that we're not going to display anyway, because as you can see here, the amount of items that we will show is limited. We don't show an infinite list. So together they end up saving just a bunch of time, and it is really astonishing how snappy it feels. It's just a joy to use, actually. So thank you, Tim, for working on Assistant. Another thing that's really cool is that the decompression performance work has continued as well. So Tim has done a bunch of stuff. And I saw one thing that I liked in particular, which was that we have this tarball of Clang, and it is now, I think, twice as fast to decompress it as it was a month ago, which is really, really nice. I didn't time that, but let's try it again. Yeah, 2.6 seconds on my machine, which would have been like 5 point something seconds just a month ago. And I think on Linux, on the same machine, it decompresses in just under a second. So we do have work to do still, but it is really, really great to see attention being put into performance work as well, because we have such a great amount of functionality now, and it is important to also make it pleasant and snappy to use. Anyway, let's see. Oh, something that got a lot of attention this month was the cal command. So cal is kind of a command line calendar utility, and Karol was working a whole bunch on it. And one example of what he was doing, you can see right here, the 30, which is today's date, is now displayed with reverse video, or like inverse colors. So you can see what day it is more easily. And he also did cal-y, which generates the whole year as an output. Oh, why is the cursor blinking there? Ooh, we got some terminal bugs here, I think. Okay, ignoring that. Yeah, this is the whole year. And he also added -3, which gives you the previous, current, and next month. So it's like a 3-up view. And I think both the -y and -3 are FreeBSD things that Karol just borrowed from them. So thank you, Karol, for improving our cal command. Something else that's new this month is the certificate settings app. So this is kind of a GUI for our I guess, TLS certificate store. So these are all of the certificates we have installed with the system and the issuer and the expiration date for them. So you can go here and look at them. And it also allows you to import if you have a certificate that you would like to put into the system certificate store. You can also export, I think, yeah, right here. And it gives you the certificate as a PEM file, I guess. It's pretty sweet. So the certificate settings app was built by Fabian. So thank you, Fabian, for working on this. Very cool. And speaking of crypto, I know that Stellar 7 was working on a bunch of stuff this month. One of which was implementing the PDKDF2 algorithm, and also a bunch of other work on just refactoring our crypto libraries and paving the path towards implementing support for more encryption technologies, which is going to be awesome. All right, graphics. So in the graphics department, my favorite change of the month is Jelle fixed a long-standing font rasterization issue that used to be visible with the UI font I'm using, which is Inter. And there was a glitch that would show up at certain subpixel positions in some characters. So like the dot over I and the dot over J would sometimes get sort of misrendered. And Jelle tracked it down and fixed it, and now we don't have to see those glitchy little letters here and there, which I'm very, very grateful for. So thank you, Jelle, for fixing that. I don't have a great way to demonstrate that other than to say, you're not seeing the glitch anymore. Also in graphics, there's been a bunch of work on image decoders. So Lucas has been hard at work on JPEG support. And he's been implementing like a bunch of stuff like 4-channel JPEGs, and I think work on, I forget what they're called, like spectral something and progressive JPEG. And I think we probably have test cases here somewhere. Yeah, so we could look at those. Successive approximation.jpg. Censored unicorn. All right. Hey, that's Brian. Wow, I never looked in this directory before. Big image. Oh, that is a big image. Took a while to load. Yeah, so Lucas has just been improving our JPEG decoder incrementally, and more JPEGs are just starting to actually work, which is cool when you're browsing the web, because pages that used to be imageless start to be image full. And thank you, Lucas, for continuing to work on our JPEG support. That is really awesome. Spectral selection. Yeah, I don't know what these things are. I haven't studied JPEG enough. By the way, we also now have some support for WebP. I think, yeah. So here, for example, is a lossless WebP image. Nico has been doing a bunch of work on color profiles, as he likes to do, but he's also been implementing support for WebP. So I think lossless WebPs are essentially working now, and he has started work on the lossy WebP, which is a bit more complicated. I have a WebP here somewhere. Yeah, this one is lossless WebP from the web that I got. Which is really cool, because more and more websites are starting to use WebP, so it is something that we definitely want to support. So thank you, Nico, for working on that. Another thing that is pretty cool is I saw that Ayush was doing some work on the LibCpp, so our C++ library, and adding support for C-style arrays. So if you have an array of characters like this, and let's do something with it, now you can control click on this and it will take you to the definition of that symbol. So our LibCpp actually understands this array syntax now. So thank you, Ayush, for implementing that. And there's so many random things happening every month. One thing that I am particularly happy with is that Ali went and fixed DNS caching. So I'm just going to assume that there's something called slowdns.com. Oh, that was pretty fast. Cloud.com. Can we get something that's like suspiciously slow? Apple.com. I don't know. They're also fast. Anyway, these are now cached. So we always had a DNS cache, but it was broken for years. So Ali found the issue and fixed it. So now if you do a successful DNS lookup, we will remember the result of that lookup and reuse it when you do a subsequent lookup of the same name. Basic stuff, it was just broken for years and nobody noticed. And I think this kind of thing is really, really important, obviously, for web loading performance, where you don't want to be like going out and doing a DNS request repeatedly for the same host name. That's just silly. All right. Oh, the final thing I wanted to show you here was in Spreadsheet, of all things. So Hutton implemented, I think, metadata undo redo. So if you have a bunch of cells and you were to make them red background, for example, this is now an undoable action. So you can undo and redo, like that. Previously, it was just not part of the undo stack. So thank you, Hutton, for making cell metadata editing an undoable action. All right. Now we are going to hear from somebody else.
Well, hello, friends. Today I'm going to talk first about some community websites that have been updated recently. The first is Heha's ports.serenityOS.net. This is a website that is tracking port updates for software that we've ported to SerenityOS. He's got a changelog here. You can take a look at that, but most of these sites are going to work well in Serenity, but some of them aren't, so I'm going to swap to Linux here at the end. But here's a changelog. I'm going to highlight a couple things here. So the first is this new versions page, which does show, when a new port merge request is merged, that'll update this feed. This is pretty sweet. It's got links to all the ports inside the ports website. So here's the link for Stockfish, which someone recently ported. Seems a bit topical with the chess world championship going on right now. The next is this dependency graph that Heha created based on the dependency information from each of the ports. This is just generated whenever he gets around to it. But some interesting things to point out is almost everything depends on zlib, and we've got a ton of SDL2 ports. Next, Heha added a JSON feed for the ports. So whenever, I believe it's every day or so, this JSON file is updated, which actually gets rendered somewhat reasonably in Ladybird here, but it shows it's got an object for each port we've got, and this is intended for consumption by other package manager tools. Alright, next is there's an issues feed here, so there's plenty of ports that are, well, they get out of date as we update the OS, and it seems that he's pulling the ports tag here to track which ports are having problems. I believe the most recent one is that OpenJDK is broken, which is unfortunate. Next is that the ports website has collections that users can upload. If you DM Heha on Discord or ask in the ports channel, you can get a sign-in, which I don't currently have. But here's one from Tim, which is the SerenityOS on SerenityOS port collection. This one has been curated so that each of the ports that are required to build the system on the system are there. And this one has a neat old feature where you can click this install button. It'll give you a bash prompt to copy paste into your terminal. This one doesn't seem to highlight in. Oh, maybe it highlights. Doesn't really highlight. It works better in Firefox. All right. So yeah. So for each of the ports on this page, we can come here and it will display, the port version, port name, whatever else. And I believe that most of these descriptions are handwritten, but some of them are auto-generated. I think I saw on the info page that Heha was using ChatGPT to do that. So if you scroll around and you see one that has that little banner that says this is auto-generated, feel free to shoot Heha a message and give it a better description. Alright, so that's the ports website. There's been a lot of interesting things added to this recently, so thanks Heha for that. Another one of Heha's projects that I believe Andreas mentioned before is the fonts website. So this one shows all of the built-in fonts for Serenity and their coverage of the Unicode, all the Unicode glyphs. So I believe, yes, here is the Katica Regular 10, which is the default font. Right now I'm using Inter 11 by Rasmus. But we can see that this has partial coverage of combining diacritical marks, and it's complete coverage of, basic Latin and that sort of thing. This page is a little bit on the laggy side in Ladybird, so maybe someone could take a look at that before next month. One final thing that was... Oh, we're still scrolling. One final thing I want to look at here in Serenity before hopping over to my Linux box is that I published a blog post recently about the build system. I had a first part last year, and this year I published one about how we started using CMake rather than just make. Hopefully it won't take another year before the next one. Okay. I'm going to hop over to my Linux box here to show off the next stage. Alright, here we are, back on my Ubuntu desktop in Firefox. There's one last website from Heha I wanted to demonstrate here. That is the emoji.serenityos.net webpage. This shows the coverage of the emoji spectrum in our default emoji font on Serenity. And these are actually... I believe these are rendered with a tool that Linus made that converts our emoji bitmaps into something that any browser can render. So it looks like we're missing ambulance, among other things, but we're about 80% done with all these emojis. So hit up the fonts channel in Discord if you want to tackle some of these missing ones. Alright, next we've got a couple pages on work in progress and to-do things. So recently we made a bunch of issues on GitHub for ongoing migrations. One of those is the deprecated string and deprecated fly string transition. So right around the beginning of the year, it looks like we added a new string class that's a lot more fallible. It doesn't make assumptions that you can allocate memory all the time. And as part of that transition, we renamed the old ACK string to deprecated string. And so Ben has created some graphs here. The first one tracks total number of to-dos in the project, which has been going up over time. Well, there was a little bit of time here where it went down a little bit. The next is these deprecated strings, and Ben has a bunch of charts here, but this one shows that I think we're finally below the initial number of deprecated strings, but there's still around 10,000 of them to remove in the total code base. So and has some other links on this site as well. One of which is this flame graph, which shows the percentage of to-dos versus lines of code for some of the most to-do heavy files in the project. Not surprising, the user space emulator and LibWeb are at the top of that list, but it's interesting data to look at here. Next one, this is something by Carol. This is the core stream conversion chart. So we've had some issues, I guess, with the old core file class and the core IO device class hierarchy. I think, how long ago was that now? At least 2 years. Synac added the new core stream, which then Tim moved to the ACK library. And so this chart is tracking our usage of each of these APIs. And over the past couple months, there's been a lot of work by Tim and a lot by other contributors who I'm forgetting the names of at the moment, but it's been a large group effort to remove our deprecated APIs and use the shiny new ones. So thanks everyone that's been working on that. It looks like we've still got quite a few floating around. Alright, next we're going to move on to something that Ali did recently, which is implementing WASI support. So that's the Wasm system interface, I believe that's what it stands for, which is a way to run just regular C programs compiled to Wasm, and it gives a kind of syscall API for compilers to use. So I have here a test file. It's just a simple hello world, and if I compile this with Clang 15 targeting the Wasm32 WASI ABI, and I give it a sysroot from the WASI libc project, then I can compile this test.wasm file, which is a WebAssembly binary module. Another way to compile things to Wasm is with the Inscription project, but that gets a little bit more complicated to do. So here we have the Wasm binary. We're telling it to use Wasm mode, and we're going to execute the underscore start symbol, which is the pre-main function in most C programs. And this will print our hello world. Now, I believe, yeah, we should be able to use, this isn't going to work. Anyway, we can use Inscription to do this as well, and we have to ignore some Inscription symbols in order for that to actually load in our Wasm interpreter. So thanks, Ali, for adding WASI support to our Wasm interpreter. It's not complete, but it is enough to run printf hello world, and I believe some other functions, but I haven't seen any evidence of those. So yeah. Alright, last thing I'm going to show today is the ARM64 support. So there's been a ton of work by Timon and Daniel and Idan and everybody who's been collaborating in the AR64 channel on Discord. So here we can see that if I run, if I try to run QEMU with the AR64 port, we boot up, we saw the splash screen that I showed the last time I presented this to the monthly update videos. We actually boot through the through to the Windows server. Now this is running without KVM because I'm on an x86-64 platform, and it you can see here that I updated the shell RC file to echo hello friends and print the uname. So we can see that we are actually on the ARM64 port here in my ARM64 QEMU. This is running with the Raspberry Pi model. There is one significant problem left, which is there's no keyboard and mouse support. So we are missing well, the Raspberry Pi doesn't have a PS2 keyboard and mouse port, and it needs USB. And we don't have USB human interface device support in the Serenity kernel. So until we get USB HID implementation, we're going to be a little bit blocked here. So if you or someone you know knows anything about implementing a USB HID stack, hit us up in the USB channel on Discord. Alright, so just to show that we are still kind of incomplete, I'm going to run the tests here. Change the shellrc file to run the tests after it prints the uname. And this will run our test suite executable, which is the same one that we use in CI. This isn't going to quite work, as we'll see once this boots up. Come on. Alright. So it should start running the first set of tests here, but the moment we get to one that runs into some unimplemented feature, we actually get a kernel panic. This one comes from capture stack trace in the processor, which is here because we don't know how to capture a stack trace on ARM64. There's a big old fat to-do here that looks like Gunnar added 6 months ago. So there's still a lot of work to do. I believe that this test intentionally does something wrong. It's a crash test. Something similar happens if you try to run something like the browser, because we are missing a bunch of math functions here. I ran this earlier. We're missing an implementation of log2 for ARM64. So there's been some incredible progress on the ARM port lately, and it's only more to come. So thanks everyone for that. One last thing is that we are running, where is it? We are running, the root file system is attached through the SD card. So there was SD card support added recently by Marco, and I believe, yes, Ulrich. So thanks to both of these guys for collaborating on getting this SD host controller stuff added. There's a whole bunch of things here. I believe this supports version 2 and version 3 of the SD card spec. So big thanks to them, because the way that we were hacking this up before with a gigantic RAM disk is really not the way you want to boot on a device with only 1 GB of memory. Alright, so huge progress on ARM64, and I hope to see more in the future.
I'd like to start off with showing you that we have Intel HDA support. And this is something I worked on personally, and it actually landed before April, but I'm too proud of it to not show you. So what this is support for the Intel HD audio controllers. A lot of bare metal machines use the HDA controllers, and this means that we have audio support on a wider range of machines. Try this out yourself if you'd like. This should work for you. Of course, this will work for you in the VM, but let me know if this works for you on your bare metal machine as well. The more the merrier. Then let's move on to what other people have made. So one very cool thing is VP9. VP9 is a video codec, and Greg has been working on improving the performance and stability and features that we have in the VP9 decoding. This is a test file that we have inside of Serenity, but he has made sure that we can now support a wider range of VP9 files. So thank you, Greg. And another very cool thing that landed in April was support for the media element. Well, we have this neat little test page. Let me get that for you. So we can now play video files directly inside of browser. And everything that you see here in terms of the media controls has been, well, basically designed and put into LibWeb by Tim. And as you can see, this is working We have nice little JavaScript interaction on top there. Very neat. And this also means that we have improved video support for a lot of websites. And I believe with some patches, even Steam is working at the moment. And we have some different playback options. For example, we can set it to autoplay. This means that as soon as the page loads, this will start playing. And Tim has added some options to browser to make sure that you can influence behavior, because if you do not like autoplay, you can then disable it. And poster, which basically means that you want to show a frame of the video or a thumbnail before starting to play the video. So very neat, very nice indeed. And a final mention for Luke. Luke has added support for navigating to video files. And basically what that means is if you navigate to a video file, it will then generate the necessary HTML to show you the video inside of browser. So very cool. Something else that we have been working on, myself and Tim, is improving support for LibSQL. And LibSQL is our library that handles SQL statements and implements a browser, a heap storage or a database storage format. This is all custom, of course, like everything in Serenity is. And one place in particular that's very neat is browser storage. So for example, if I go to this page and I inspect storage, you can see that there's not a lot of local and session storage, but you can see that we have some cookies here because I visited Google earlier. Please don't steal my personal identity. And this set of cookies is actually stored inside of a database. And I can show you this by opening SQL Studio and connecting to the browser database. And for example, if I now select every cookie that we have, you can see those same cookies coming in. So really this is just a table, and the table has certain columns, and these columns need to store certain values. And before April, what we had was a limited amount of storage available for each value or each row even. And this was limited to about 1024 bytes. And that meant that if you got a cookie that was long enough, basically LibSQL would then go in and trim that for you down to the maximum size that it could store. So whenever browser would then reload the page, it would get a shorter cookie back, effectively corrupting your session or whatever was stored in that cookie. So I went in and I fixed that. And this means that for websites with very long cookies, very long sessions, due to tokens, stuff like that, that is now working a lot better. And Tim also went in and made sure that we had improved support for certain SQL statements with exist subclasses, I believe. And that's always nice. We are always in need in improving LibSQL and the support it has for all kinds of different SQL statements. So really awesome. Let's move on to Pixel Paint. Pixel Paint has received a number of updates, and I think that one of the most important ones is the support for the R gradient tool. If I were to set up a new layer, and let me give it a smaller size, something like that, neat little square, and let's move that around. So it used to be the case that if I were to draw a linear gradient like this, two things would happen. One is that the relative positioning of the gradient itself would not be inside of this layer as it is right now, but it would be on the top left of the parent layer or the image as a whole. So some relative positioning fixes have gone in by Ethan. So thank you, Ethan. And another thing that has happened is that, as you can see, the gradient is only drawn inside of the active layer. And that's what you'd expect if you were drawing a new gradient inside of this layer. That wasn't the case before. It would just draw all over the place. And Tim went in and fixed that this was clipped to the active layer. Another neat thing is that we now have radial gradients. So let me show you that. And let's pick a more fun color. So very nice. You can go in, use these handles to move the gradient, resize it, make an oval. Very cool stuff. And this has been implemented by Torsten. So thank you, Torsten. Tim also fixed the fact that we have a recent file list or recently opened file list in Pixel Paint that wasn't updated whenever you would save an image. So for example, if I would save this like this, purple radial gradient pp, this is now neatly updated. So thank you, Tim, for that. And finally, if, for example, you were to have a very neat image like this, and we put in some streaks like that, we have a bloom filter, and this bloom filter, oh, let me merge this first. How do we do that? Flatten the image. All right. And if we take the bloom filter, it used to be the case that if we were to drag along with these sliders here, that the preview wouldn't get updated. And this is fixed by Matt, so thank you, Matt. All neat little quality of life improvements for Pixel Paint. And now a Windows Server update. If we take a random window, and if you were to move this to the edge of your screen, you would get these tiling overlays, basically previewing for you what the window would do. And Tom went in and he implemented a new tiling window behavior. And it's called tile immediately. And it does basically what you expect it to do. If you take a window and you move it towards the edge of the screen, it will preview that window as if it was already tiled. Very nice. Very cool preview behavior there. Thank you, Tom. Something I did was to make sure that when we set a background image, for example, we have a grid. Well, as you can see, it's in center mode. It's pretty nice. And it used to be the case that if you were to select stretch, it would then use linear interpolation for the entire background image. And what we do now is use bilinear filtering, which is a very tiny change, but it really improves the visuals on the background images here. So neat little improvements overall. Ports. I'd like to show you 3 new ports that we've had in April. One is RVVM. RVVM has been added by the user Lekit, who is also the maintainer of this project. And RVVM is a RISC-V emulator, which you can pass it a kernel and pass it a root image with whatever. It can be a program, a game. He has made sure that it's linked to the SDL port we already have. So if you were to start up a game with this, it would automatically make use of our SDL port and integration with both Windows Server, libGL, etc. So really cool stuff there. Another port that we got in April was SSMTP. Thank you, Fabian, for that. SSMTP is basically a Linux command line tool that you can use to send emails. This will not work because I've not configured it in any capacity that it can send mail, but if you were to do so, it will probably be able to send out actual mails from the command line. Really cool for batched emailing. Another cool port is Stockfish by Tim. Stockfish is, I think until recently, the best chess engine out there. Really cool stuff. What you can do with this is use the CLI, this text interface, to basically play a game of chess. So let's try that out. I'm not a chess player myself, but I've been led to believe that this is a very good move. And then we can display the board, and as you can see, I've moved my pawn 2 places. And then we can ask Stockfish to think about its next move. So we do that by go move time 2.5 seconds. and it will tell us what it thinks that it's, what its best move would be. C7, C5. All right, let's try that. We add that move to the list. And there we go. We have a chess game underway. So obviously this isn't ideal, but I believe that there's already a pull request out there that links up the Stockfish port to our chess game. And that would be really cool. So instead of our internal engine, we would be able to select a different engine here, Stockfish, that would underwater interact with this tool. So really cool stuff there. Thank you, Tim. The very last thing I'd like to show you is an upcoming port. This is something I've been working on for the last couple of days. And it's Serious Sam, the first encounter. Serious Sam is a game from 2001, and it uses the OpenGL 1.5 API, which is lucky for us because that's what we support at the moment. This is using a software rasterizer that we have inside of Serenity. And as you can see, it works. So let's try to boot up a game. 90% of the time, this works all the time. And there we go. This is basically a rendered cutscene. Well, it's not pre-rendered. It's just using libgl. And let's skip this and skip that. And there we go. The performance is not there yet, but as always, we're working on that. The controls are a bit clunky because, well, we can't really control the mouse inside of the VM. Or at least we can't keep the mouse cursor inside of the window. And there we go. This is working. Oh, let's not die here. And that was it from me. Thank you, and back to you, Andreas.
All right, now let's take a look at browser stuff. So for that, we are going to use Ladybird here on Linux because we also have a cross-platform version of the browser that we don't always see in these monthly videos. So the first thing I want to show you is SVG gradients, which were implemented by Benjamin, or MacDo, as he's also known. So these are pretty nice, and I think the reason that he implemented them was because they are used on the Discord login page. So they were making the Discord login page look pretty weird. There's this big SVG background here, as you can see, and it uses a bunch of gradients. They're pretty subtle, but you can tell here, for example. And before Benjamin's changes, we would just render these areas as black, but now we actually paint with gradient. So very, very nice progression. Speaking of progressions, we let me bring this up. So we now support a whole bunch of new CSS length units. Sam went and added all of these things. They are various viewport relative and font relative units. CSS just keeps adding more units, so we just have to keep adding support for them. As Sam writes here, did you think the existing set of length units was not enough? Are you bored of EX and VW? Do you crave dozens of arcane letter combinations to try and memorize the meanings of? I think this list kind of speaks for itself. It is, sometimes it is a bit strange how many things they add to CSS, but we don't really have a choice. Anyway, since we are here on GitHub, by the way, you'll notice that it is dark by default. I didn't have to go in the menu and switch my color scheme. And that is because the default auto mode now actually works. And we use a dark mode detection thing that Tim made. And then I hooked it up so that when we're in dark mode, we default to CSS prefers color scheme dark. So that is a nice thing that just works now. Other stuff that's on GitHub, by the way, let me bring up something else. We have a huge refactoring project ongoing that Alexander is working on. And I kind of started it back in November, but Alexander has merged most of my patches from that, apparently down to 2 remaining of mine, and then he's been continuing this thing. And it's navigables, which are a big refactor they did to the HTML specification, dealing with how like history and navigation works in the HTML spec. They came up with all these new primitives and new algorithms for that to sort of better describe how page navigation works. And we, and by we I mean Alexander, is we are working on re-architecting our engine so that it matches the navigables architecture from the spec. So Alex is just doing a fantastic job with this stuff. So big thanks to him for working on that. And by the way, Alex has also been doing a bunch of work on table layout recently. And I don't have a demo for that, but he just keeps fixing random table bugs, which is really nice, especially because tables are notoriously under-specced. So big respect for taking on stuff like that. A thing that I fixed was z-index. So CSS z-index is a bit of an annoying property. So here on osnews.com, which has operating system news for the enthusiast, it used to be that this cookie banner here would end up below this black blurry overlay, so you couldn't actually interact with the cookie banner, which made it impossible to use the site. And that was because it had a z-index of like 9999999 many nines. And the thing is that we were truncating that incorrectly, and we ended up with a number that wasn't saturated to the maximum integer that we could store, but instead it would just wrap around in some unpleasant way. And we sort of misinterpreted the Z order of things. So now I've fixed that so that we're consistent with other browsers where like astronomically huge Z index values are just treated as like int32 max, basically. And then I can see this lovely cookie banner here. Cool. Another thing I've been working on a lot is Flexbox. So our Flexbox implementation is starting to actually shape up to be pretty good, I think. Here is a demo page by Jen Simmons. She has a ton of fun and very interesting demos on her website, labs.jensimmons.com. We don't necessarily lay out the labs page perfectly yet. It's going to need some work there, but she has like this history of making awesome HTML and CSS demos that make for great test cases to work against. So I got this particular test working properly, and it's just flex boxes in different configurations. And these are image elements, which until a few years ago, all the major engines also had problems with image elements as flex items. So I've made sure that we have, we correctly handle image elements as flex items as well, which is really nice. All right, so let me talk about somebody else. So Sam did a nice thing for Bootstrap. So I think Jelle reported that the Bootstrap site was working. Somebody reported that the Bootstrap site was not working. And Sam figured out that we needed to implement this thing called sub-resource integrity. So if I open the DOM inspector here, we can drill down to the, there's a link element for the style sheet right here. And you can see that they're pulling in the style sheet with an integrity attribute. It has a hash here. And Sam went and implemented this feature in our fetch code so that if this is present, then we now actually validate that that the hash matches. So it's a pretty cool feature. I didn't even know about it until I saw Sam working on this. So basically, web pages can say like, oh, like use this file, but it has to have this hash. Kind of cool feature. Anyways, thank you, Sam, for fixing that. And by the way, Bootstrap is starting to look kind of nice in the browser. Tends to be a lot of flex and grid layout on these pages, and we are doing better and better with this, although our SVG is still a bit spotty. And I also, speaking of Bootstrap, another toolkit, CSS toolkit I spent some time on was Tailwind. So here's one site that uses Tailwind, and their SVG is missing, but the site itself is laid out pretty much correctly, save for some missing SVGs. And I was using this as a test case to just drive Flexbox improvements, and it's been pretty successful. Actually, maybe I should show you in another browser what it looks like so that you can compare. So yeah, so these are SVGs that are missing. But other than those, you know, we're doing pretty well. Missing SVGs here as well. And the site uses Tailwind, as I was saying. So Bootstrap and Tailwind sites getting better and better in Ladybird. Oh, something that came up, by the way, in the last update video when Linus was demonstrating something was that we had a serious amount of CPU churn when looking at the GitHub pull request list for Serenity, and that was due to a bug in our HTML event loop that I fixed. So you can now browse the pull requests, apparently not without crashing, but at least without churning the CPU. And oh, look, here's Jelle's port of Serious Sam. Very cool. And GitHub layouts, by the way, also are looking pretty good these days. There's a little glitch up here with placeholders and input boxes, but other than that, it's really starting to come together. So that is really sweet. Another thing I want to tell you about is Wikipedia. So Wikipedia recently deployed a new layout for their site, and I'm happy to say that we are almost supporting the new layout. There is I think it's one CSS grid issue remaining that is causing this text to be under here instead of at the bottom where it's supposed to be. But at least for the English language Wikipedia, we are almost working entirely correctly, which is fantastic. And I want to give a shout out to Martin, who has been working a lot on CSS Grid, not just parsing all the CSS, but also doing the layout work. And every now and then I find a grid problem, and then I file a bug about it, and then Martin just goes and fixes it. So that has been really awesome. All right. And I almost forgot. There's a really cool thing that people got going this month, and it's in Google Maps. So let's go there. We'll visit my old office in California. So here we are in the Google Street View, looking at To Infinite Loop in Cupertino, where I used to work at Apple in the past. And this is pretty sweet. It works. It's slow, but it works. We can actually visit Apple in the Street View. And let's see if we can travel forward. Hello. I've angered it. So it is a little bit glitchy, and you can see there are some layout and painting issues, but we are making great progress even on complex sites like Google Maps. As you can see, it seems like I can't travel because it's not showing me that arrow thing. But anyway, this was in a large effort by MacDo, I think primarily, and I want to say Luke was working on it. MacDo did a whole bunch of painting code to make sure that we transform and clip all of the different segments of the 360 view here that get painted to form the street view. And it's just been really great to see that come together. So big shout outs to Benjamin or MacDo. I don't know if I should say Benjamin or MacDo, but they're the same person. Anyway, so that's really cool. And oh wait, why did I close that? Let me just open up a new Ladybird. So the last thing I wanted to mention was, what's it called? store.steampowered.com. Speaking of Benjamin, also known as MacDo, he also implemented CSS Background position so that these arrows here now point in opposite directions. Previously, I think they were pointing in the same direction. And this gives me an opportunity to just look at Steam and show you how pretty good Steam is coming along, honestly. And we can even check out this new Star Wars game here that I've heard about. And that should bring us to something pretty neat, which is we can now play the videos on Steam. I was hoping that would work. So Tim Flynn did a whole bunch of work on the video element in the browser engine, and Gregory has been working on the VP9 decoder and optimizing that for better playback performance. And what you're seeing here is where we're currently at. It's all our own code, our own browser, our own video decoder and everything. And the whole package, I think it's pretty cool how far we've come. And still, we have a long way to go, but I am just so freaking proud of all the people who are working on this, because it really feels like everybody's putting in their best. And, you just got to appreciate the awesomeness of it, I guess. So this was today's look at the browser progress and Ladybird. And that's all the things we had to show you today. So thank you so much for stopping by and staying up to date with the project. Big thank you to my co-hosts. And if you want to come chat about SerenityOS, you'll find most of us on the SerenityOS Discord server. There's a link to that in the video description. And lastly, if you would like to sponsor development of SerenityOS, there are links for that in the description as well, where you can sponsor one or more of our developers. I am personally working on this project full-time since May of 2021, and it's entirely possible thanks to the generous support of so many of you. So thank you all for helping me do this and continue to do this. It is the best job I've ever had. All right. That's it for today, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.